Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Be as cheap as it is right now for new release. Like not even for new release. Like literally, you could say that once a toy is manufactured or whatever, that's it. That's the last time. When you see the price for it, it will never go down beyond what you've seen. You can go look that TARDIS setup right now. You look it up again in a year, it will only be more expensive. It's absolutely insane. Did you end up buying the Lego Nightwing?
Oh no, I thought about it, but I'm just not a figure person in general. So like, I would buy it and be like, hell yeah, this looks dope, and then I'd be bored with it in like 30 seconds.
Yeah, the way I always think of figures is they're little plastic statues.
Yeah, and I mean, all of the figures I have were gifts from other people. So like they just kind of take up that sentimental space, but I think it's been a really, really long time since I've gone out of my way to like buy a figure for me, just because like, I don't know, I want it to be tangible. I want it to be something I can do stuff with, and statues have never really interested me, specifically because of space issues. So I didn't end up buying it, but I do remember when the Batman merchandise started selling out, I was really, really fucking tempted to get the Funko Batman and the Batmobile. That's probably the most I've been tempted by a figure in a long time.
A friend who like is super into like the pop Funko like collecting and selling and trading scene, and she like all my Funkos that I have are just gifts from her, and I don't know how to politely tell her stop giving me these fucking things.
I hate Funkos.
I don't know how many
Funkos are fugly.
The only Funko Pop I've ever bought for myself was back when like they were still kind of novel, and they had a Phantasm Funko, and I was like, yeah, I need that. And that's about it. All the other ones are gifts. Although I do like the Eggman Funko. He makes
the only one I bought for myself, I think, was the Blade Runner 2049 one, because I saw it in stores. I'm like, oh, I just got to get this on principle. And then I went to the mall with a friend the other day, and they found an Angel one, and they bought it for me out of principle just because they didn't think it would exist. So, like, that's cool, but, like, an Angel and a Blade Runner Funko are so niche, even in the Funko market, that I think it's a little bit cooler than just, like, Batman Funko.
Yeah.
For sure. Anyway, you guys cool to go ahead and get started? Alrighty. Hi everyone, welcome to the final episode in our Doctor Who multi-Doctor crossover story series. God, that is a fucking mouthful. Yes, we're finally wrapping this up. It had twists and turns and a surprise commentary episode. It was a fucking journey. So we're ending it here with Twice Upon a Time, the 2018 Christmas special.
2017.
Well, in all fairness, it's like 5 more days after this, and then it's 2018. So there.
That's always with Christmas specials. What the fuck do you mean? They come out on Christmas. That's the whole fucking point.
Don't you undermine my genius point. Someone was just like, oh yeah, he's really got a point. And then you're like coming in here with your rudeness.
It's like in a horror movie. It's like in a horror movie where someone's like, you're going to die. I'm like, well, depending on how long you mean, that's always true.
So anyway, yes, so this is the 2017 Christmas special. This was the last episode with Peter Capaldi as the 12th Doctor. This is the last episode that Stephen Moffat wrote for Doctor Who. And this is arguably the last multi-doctor story. Let's just say there's a reason we're not doing the one with Jodie, because personally I don't really think it counts. Because it's like a weird situation related to the continuity of her era. But yeah, this is it. This is Twice Upon a Time, the team up with the 12th Doctor and the 1st Doctor. I guess we'll just go general thoughts round robin. I'm always the most curious since he's the one with absolutely the least amount of context. Matt, what'd you think of this totally not continuity heavy episode?
Okay. So I have context for this episode, but it's very bizarre context. Is it okay if I go on a little bit of a tangent?
I'm excited.
Okay, I want to drive us around the block and come right back to general thoughts. Okay. So, being a terminally online millennial, I'm a big fan of video essays, as I'm sure many people are. And I have consumed video essays about material that I've never directly engaged with myself. Yeah. So there's a YouTuber. There's a YouTuber named HBomberGuy who is pretty well known. I'm sure people know about him. And he has a half-hour long episode or video about this episode. And it's more broadly just sort of his fucking teardown of what he perceives as Moffat-era Doctor Who problems is mostly what it is. And when he released it at the time, I was just like, oh yeah, I mean, I like this guy. I don't really care about Doctor Who, so I don't care if it gets spoiled. I just think he's an entertaining video essayist, so I'll watch it, whatever. And when you're listening to these video essayists, you know, they provide a framing for their criticisms. They say, here's the thing that happened, here's why I think it's bad, and yada, yada, yada. And within the framing that he provided, I was just kind of like, yeah, I've not seen it. I'm not an expert, but it sounds like this is a pretty bad episode. It sounds dumb. And then I watched it yesterday, and no, I liked this. I thought this was pretty good, actually. So the moral of the story is don't listen to YouTubers. They are liars and charlatans.
And
A YouTube video.
You've given me so much joy and yet so much anger right now, Matt. Because, oh my god, what a fucking shock. Someone talking about Capaldi era Doctor Who on YouTube is mis-fucking representing it. What a surprise.
That was the thing. So then, like, after I watched the episode, I was like, you know what, fuck it. Let's go back and rewatch this HBomberGuy video. And I did, and I'm like, look, generally, I genuinely think the dude is a smart, insightful guy. But I'm watching his take on this episode, and I'm just like, you are, like, completely... You're presenting your criticisms, like, without the context that makes them thematically relevant to the show. And, like, things he specifically had problems with were some of my favorite things in the episode. So, like, no, I actually thought this was pretty good. Like, I liked this a lot. And YouTubers are liars and charlatans. I don't know what to tell you. That's it. That's my general thoughts.
I think that's really what it comes down to. Like, I enjoy doing the review episodes of Geeky Gentleman because I enjoy getting my thoughts out on a thing. But I think Steve and I had this discussion a while ago. It's like, has a review ever actually changed anyone's mind on a thing that they've watched? And I think the answer is probably no. But like what it does is it tends to put a context out of a thing and make people either decide that it is good or bad whether or not they have seen it. And it's always really fascinating how that works. Alfie and I have talked about this a number of times, just seeing how people will just rag on different comic book stories that they've literally never read because it's just what's been said about it online, and it's absolutely insane. So no, I'm actually very glad that you have such a rich background with this one. I would.
Well, it was funny 'cause I'm watching it and I didn't even realize that was the episode we were talking about until I started recognizing like plot elements and visuals, and I was just like, "Oh shit! It's that episode that he tore into for a half hour." Sweet.
That's so funny.
It was a good time. It was a fun experience. I enjoyed my time with this.
That's great. I mean, like, generally, I would say that this does have kind of all the trappings of Moffat era Who, which is hilarious, because I would agree with that, like, general criticism that this is probably pretty representative of how Moffat writes Who. Like, probably even more so than the 50th. I think this is pretty representative of, like, his bag of tricks and such. But at the same time, I do legitimately like this one. This is really, really good. I think that Moffat, being a Doctor Who fan for so many years and kind of acknowledging the failings of classic Who in a way that pisses off a lot of people, is probably more aware than anyone else how bad the 2 out of 3 classic Doctor team-up stories are. And so I think he really does give it his all when he's writing these multi-Doctors. And it's so funny to me that the 3 new Who multi-Doctor stories that are like true multi-Doctor stories are all written by Moffat. That is nothing short of hysterical. And he does a really, really good job with all of them. It's, you know, Alfie, you can get this tattooed on your back. Thank you, Stephen Moffat, for saving this Geeky Gentleman series for me. Because I was like...
It feels so good. Bomber guy, Moffat video slander, Ian, because even his words are, is it Christmas Day for Geek for Food already?
I mean, like, again, my thing with Moffat has always been that, like, I get frustrated by his failings because I think he is so good. Like, when he's on... But when he's off, you can just like, come on, you're better than this. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. But...
And I totally understand that. And before we, I guess, go into the meat of the episode, I do want to say a lot of things. I think Matt's thing is very indicative of just a Doctor Who thing that happened around this time period. And it spiraled into the Jodie era, and then the Jodie era actually kind of being self-fulfilling prophecy kind of really spiraled it. But around the 1st to 2nd season of Moffat is when the Doctor Who online fan base really started getting nasty. And specifically very targeted personal attacks of the cast and crew of Doctor Who, specifically Moffat himself. And a lot of this was a Tumblr-based fandom, but a lot of it as well was just YouTubers and stuff like that, who, like you said, Matt, can be very intelligent, well-spoken people, but for some reason, and whether you like it or not, I don't really care. You can think it's the worst thing ever in the world, but there was a bit of a line crossed around this era where people really started acting like Stephen Moffat had shot their fucking dog or something. Like, for making a cute Christmas special with the first Doctor. I don't understand what specifically got people like that, but the fact that it permeated and colored people's perceptions to such a degree, I don't think is I don't think it's something that's really gone away, because still you'll see it whenever it's people talk about like Hellbent or Heaven Sent or something like that. You'll see like a very large it's a microcosm compared to The Last Jedi, but it's very similar to how people talk about The Last Jedi and Rian Johnson. It's nothing in terms of scale, because Doctor Who and Stephen Moffat are fucking tiny compared to that, but it gives me the same vibe, especially with how much was like video essays that came out about it. You don't see stuff like that for the Davies era of Who, or even some of the Matt Smith stuff, so I think it was interesting that you brought that up, Matt, and I think that's something about this era that is going to be fascinating as more time goes on, because I think I'm already starting to see it soften up a bit, but like living in it and being a fan of it was rough.
Anyway, so more let's I guess go just more round robin with general thoughts. Steve, you've been pretty quiet. What were your general thoughts on Twice Upon a Time?
So I've been rewatching all of Reboot Who recently, and I started series 9 over the weekend. And so I'm not organically to this special, but I have seen this special, so now I'm just kind of watching things out of order. Which, it's Doctor Who, so that kind of tracks. I'm experiencing it the way it's meant to be experienced. So there's a lot of things where I'm like, I don't know if this is a problem or if I just have to wait until I get to Series 10. But outside of that, I know this is good. I enjoy this. I don't think this is as good as The Day of the Doctor. The advantage it has is I think it's a smaller, more intimate story than Day of the Doctor. And Day of the Doctor is part 2 of a trilogy, and so it just kind of has to be compounded and is a bit more epic in scale. And some of the production stuff about this, where Moffat was planning to leave at 10, and then they didn't want to give up the Christmas special spot, and the new showrunner didn't want to start on a Christmas special, so they produced one more episode. I feel like that sort of like extra filler mentality kind of seeps in certain places where it just feels a little But in general, I think this is really good. I think Capaldi's got an incredible final scene as the Doctor. I think he just nails it. It's by far the best performance I've seen of him thus far as the Doctor. And I really, really like the guy they get to play the first Doctor. I think he did a really good job. I think he's a little softer than I would like my first Doctor to be. He doesn't seem like quite as edgy, but maybe that's because Capaldi is so fucking edgy. So it's a weird one. I was talking to Alfie about this. I feel like Capaldi really could have just been cast as the first Doctor if they wanted, but it's probably something like that. But no, I think this is good. There's something really meta about this one that's meta about all of the best Doctor Who, where it is both a story about the character and his life, but it's also a lot of winking at the camera and both the actors and the audience kind of sharing a relationship with each other. The moments where it feels like both Capaldi is talking to his childhood hero and talking about the kind of disillusionments he's had with it over the years, while at the same time the Doctor addressing the audience about how he's grown and changed as a person. I think that stuff all really hits. I think the problem is just all of the emotional beats of the first and 12th Doctor relating to each other are great. And then there's just a whole episode in between I don't care about.
You don't like the plot here? I thought it was kind of an interesting plot to do like a thing where there's actually not a villain, it's just the Doctor solving a problem. Because that doesn't happen as much as it used to.
Yeah, it takes a lot of restraint to do that, and I definitely appreciate it, but I think it's less of a problem with the episode and more of just I think the interactions and the sort of existential stuff of it is so much more interesting. You'd almost rather wish this was like a time crash thing where there isn't even a plot and they're just talking to each other the whole time, you know?
Yeah, but I don't know. It's kind of fun to... Like, there's still things moving, there's still things driving. If there wasn't a plot, I don't think we'd get the 12th Doctor and the first Doctor's TARDIS, kind of stuff like that. That's just kind of neat fun.
I also do think Gatiss is really, really, really good in this.
Super good.
He writes a lot of stuff with Moffat, and he's acted in a handful of stuff that he's done with Moffat. Like, he plays Mycroft in Sherlock. But he always sort of feels to me like he's winking at the camera a little bit. In this, he does not at all. And I read up a little bit about this and how, like, originally he was supposed to be the grandfather of the Brigadier, and then there were some problems with, like, the continuity in the estate, and there's this weird compromise position where, like, he could be or he couldn't be. But you read an interview with him, and he talks about how much it meant for him to be that character and to, like, write himself into the canon of his favorite TV show. And you're just like, no, fuck it. He is the grandfather of the Brigadier, and I fucking love it.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, as far as I'm concerned, he is just communicated in text. That is the first time I've ever heard anything outside of that. I don't... If they were trying to cover it up vaguely for legal reasons, they did a real shit job of it because it's inherently obvious. So
yeah, I don't know the full details, and Alfie can probably fill this stuff in, but apparently, and this is just glancing at citations on a wiki, not even reading the wiki summary, but the articles the wiki links to, apparently that was supposed to be very clear early on, and then the estate of, I guess it's the actor, got a hold of it, and they're like, no, according to canon, this other person is supposed to be his grandfather, and so we can't have this happen. And so then they had to do some kind of finagling to be like, okay, it could be this or it could be that.
As far as I'm concerned, in text it reads fine as either father or grandfather. Just depends on where you place it timeline-wise. Anyway, Alfie, you're the Moffat stan, you're the Capaldi stan. What are your general thoughts on this episode?
So this one's cute. It's almost funny is as much as I'm like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, Moffat thing. This is one of his fluffier scripts. Like it's not, but I think there's a very different context, and I guess when Steve eventually comes to it, he can talk about this, and Ian, you can maybe come to it. But watching this in isolation as a Christmas special is very different and almost better than watching it after the episodes that precede it, which is like the fucking heart-wrenching series finale, suicidal. Like it's the most like, it's like. This is like reading All-Star Superman after reading the Tom King I Am Suicide Batman issue. So it's like it's a bit of a total whiplash, but it's also still dealing with the same stuff. Like this is still very much a story about that. It's not shying away from it or any way or kind of the thing. It is, and Capaldi's last speech when he's in the battlefield is, oh my god, the way he says "I would shatter you" is fucking spine chilling. Like that's just fantastic writing and performance. So this still does have weight to it. This still is a great story, and I agree with Ian. I like that there's no monster for the Doctor to fight in this. I love when Capaldi's like, oh, I don't know what to do, and there's not evil plan. Like that's such a great beat for him. It's just he's so disappointed and like, how do I operate now if I can't stop the bad guy? Which is great because there's a great contrast between he has this big speech, is I am the Doctor, yes, but Moffat does a really good job, and I think especially in his last episode of being aware of like how big he'd made the Doctor, that it's always constantly undercut. Like it's always like, oh, they cut out all the jokes. It's really good in keeping him. Yes, he is epic, and yes, he is the most important figure in the universe by sheer factor of him being all of these episodes, all of these adventures. But he's still that same confused kind of madman who's just flailing around trying to get things to work, and he doesn't want to lose anything, he doesn't want to change. That's always been his character. So all of that is just really, really well done into this not being a story about the Doctor trying to save someone. It's about the Doctor facing death and learning to accept it, and to, oh, this is what I've always done. Moffat compared this in an interview he did to that feeling of like, whenever you get comfy somewhere, wherever you like, there's a new move about to happening or a new step in a relationship or something, there's always a part of you that's like, no, stay here. It's warm here. I don't want to do this. Like, this is wrong. And the Doctor going through that with regeneration, having to meet his younger self who's gone through the exact same thing and being like, oh, this is so silly of me. Of course, this is what I always do. And that's one of those things with Doctor Who and kind of IP fictional writing in general, where like, that's fucking real, man. Like, that's a human, really hard to navigate experience. And here's Doctor Who using its franchise tenets of, oh, our character can regenerate, so our character can be played by multiple different actors at different periods of his life, but also as a stand-in for death, but as a stand-in for change. And really smartly seeing that not as, oh, I can do a lore meeting here where the first Doctor can meet the 12th Doctor and it can just be fun for that. Looking at it as a story reason and like, the 12th Doctor wants to die. Who is the one person he can see that will make him realize why he shouldn't die? Himself, in the very first state of this journey has broken the Capaldi Doctor, but the first Doctor hasn't even embarked on that journey yet, and he's already shaky. And all of that is so fucking strong. Like, I can't gush about that enough. That's genius writing. That's legitimately phenomenal. The rest of it are wrapped around it with the plot and stuff. And how it's executed with getting to see the Daleks and stuff is more just, let's have some fun, it's Christmas, let's get the gang back together, let's bring in Pearl Mackie because Moffat miswriting her. Like, there's more of a celebration there, it's less heavy. But the fact that it doesn't undercut all the stuff with 12 and 1 and him dealing with his weight and stuff, I think is really, really, really strong. So I love it on that level for just the idea and how it's portrayed. And I couldn't think of a better. It's crazy. They already made the perfect ending for the 12th Doctor in the last one, but then he made another one that's really just as good. So I think that's kind of a Shadley move where you could have your perfect regeneration episode. Someone tells you no, you have to wait and do another one. And Ian, you kind of, when we had that episode a long time ago about like the company aspect of like making sure you do the IP right, I think this is a really good example of Moffat could have been a bitch and kind of been like, no, I made my perfect regeneration story, deal with it. And instead he was like, okay, how can I make this work? And then we got this, and I think that was a really smart way of going about that.
I think that's absolutely true, because the thing he did is he made it an interesting epilogue to his regeneration thing. Like, what would have been problematic or whatever here is if the Doctor didn't have to regenerate somehow after it. And like, just from I guess by the time he's on his like 13th, 14th regeneration at this point, so I guess he's just gotten really good at learning how to hold it back. And that might explain why the TARDIS keeps getting fucking blown up, because the Doctor just keeps like holding it in, and then it just busts right all over your face. And so like that, it's kind of like amusing in a way in that regard, but no, it is. I think it does really play overall. I think it plays well off of the previous series as far as Capaldi's Doctor's character arc. I think that's all handled really, really well. I think the things that I have any kind of problem with in this episode really do relate around just Moffat's faults as a writer. I think Moffat has a really hard time with fully committing to a decision. He often has a have your cake and eat it too kind of mentality that makes a lot of his decisions feel like very undercut and kind of takes away some of the emotional weight of them by kind of either undoing them or providing a quote-unquote out that doesn't feel very satisfying. So this, and I feel like this episode is, the problems I do have with it, even though I do quite enjoy it, I like this one a lot. I feel like this episode kind of has them doubled down in a way that feels very like disingenuous. So the first one to talk about isn't even necessarily wholly a part of this episode, though it's mentioned here, is the ending of Bill's story in the last episode. So I'm going to tell Matt this just to see how he feels, because it gets mentioned here, but it's not like really dwelled on. So Bill got turned into a Cyberman in the last episode. That's how she died. She died as a Cyberman.
Yeah, that just happened like last episode?
Yeah, last episode. Well, I mean, episode before last, she got turned into a Cyberman, and then the last episode, she was a Cyberman the whole time.
Wow, the way they play it, it feels like something that happened like a while ago.
Well, and that's the interesting thing, because that is relative to Bill. It was a while ago, because the last episode ends with the Doctor dying in battle against the Cybermen before he can regenerate, and Bill, through shenanigans introduced earlier in the season, is brought back to life by another character effectively back to life by another character, and her tears after she lays the Doctor's body in the TARDIS bring him back to life for this, and then she goes off, unknowing that, she goes off and has lesbian space adventures. I mean, that's all well and good, kind of isolated in and of itself, but then you kind of realize that becomes like a very consistent Moffat thing, because Clara's story ends not identically, but very close to the same way, to the point where
lesbian space adventures.
And then there's like So you have like Bill showing back up, and she's working on lesbian space adventures. Then you have Noddle showing back up, and he's had his happy ending too apparently. And then of course fucking Clara shows back up, and even though one of the big consequences to Clara's leaving the show was the Doctor doesn't have his memories of her, though Alfie and I have discussed this, and I have no idea what the fuck that means. But like the Doctor's lost his memories of her, and yet she gets to come back, and he gets his memories back right at the end here. And it's just like any one of those things in and of themselves, I think is fine, and I wouldn't really bat an eye out. Like I at least can understand the motivation behind doing it. But I think the thing that is actively like bad about this episode in a more general sense outside of just the episode itself as like Moffat's run on Who is just the confluation of all of those things, It begins to kind of wear a little bit.
Can I touch on the Clara thing real
Sure.
quick? Just because it's going to be a continuity thing, and so we don't want to harp on it, but I want to add to your point about Moffat's tics, which is I have no problem with happy endings. I think Moffat's problem is that he can find no way out of a sad, tragic ending except by completely reversing it into a happy ending. And it really fucking annoys me because I remember the Clara stuff. I remember watching a lot of this stuff around the time it came out, and Clara is one of my favorite companions. And her choice to basically fuck with the Doctor, and instead of having her mind erased from him, she reverses it so that the Doctor forgets her. And then she just goes away and has her own adventures. And I really, really like that. And Moffat has done this kind of device several times because his whole thing between the 11th and 12th Doctor is who is the Doctor, how is he perceived, and what is his legacy? And he addresses those questions in lots of intimate ways, but also in lots of meta-universal ways. And Smith had a whole thing where he went around the universe erasing the Doctor from existence and making people forget. And every time you get to a situation where that can't be anymore, they just kind of plop it back in. And it's really weird. And Moffat does this thing where he'll just kind of like drop those bombs in very minor bits of dialogue as if they're not relevant to the plot, even though they fundamentally change everything you're watching. So like Matt Smith is just like, oh yeah, I've just kind of been going around erasing myself. As if that's not a huge fucking deal. And then he erases all of the Daleks' memories of him. And then they just inexplicably get him back in Time of the Doctor when they're like, oh yeah, we just read the history books about you. And it restores everything to status quo again. And the Clara thing is a function of that, where it sort of feels like he gave the Doctor this really good, sad moment. And then he immediately at the end here gives him too much contentment in a way I feel like he doesn't deserve it. This is one of those things that I feel like is just a modern cultural problem, where I feel like we don't let characters learn hard lessons and then accept the consequences of them. We always gotta like throw them a bone when I feel like we really don't need to, and it undercuts the value of it. I really do genuinely think Capaldi losing his memories of Clara is a good, strong, thematic end to their relationship, especially given how it started, where she didn't even know if she knew him anymore, and then voluntarily erasing his memories of her, as opposed to her starting wishing that she had her old Doctor back. Like, it's a great bookend. And then just throwing it out here just to be cute, I really fucking hate that.
I don't think it's just to be cute. I genuinely, like, I understand the motivation behind it. And again, if it were just that in isolation, I think I'd be a lot more okay with it. But the problem is it's never just that. Like, you get this from just watching Moffat Who, and it becomes this thing of just not being able to really, like, stick to an ending. Like, I don't want to just make this all about Doctor Who as a whole, but I'll just make this point and then we can move on. When you look at, like, Davies, who, Billy Piper leaves the show, and so he gives this, like, tragic thing where she gets stuck in a parallel universe and she can't be with the Doctor. Even though they've, like, admitted their love for each other, she can't be with him. And that's like fundamentally sad. And then you get a, season break, no Rose. And then throughout season 4, Rose keeps showing up, and they're dangling this idea of the Doctor and Rose, the Doctor and Rose, the Doctor and Rose. And then by the end of series 4, the Doctor and Rose get back together in this parallel universe, but it's not our Doctor. And so he has to stand on the beach and watch himself make out with the woman he loves and just be like, this is fine, and then leave. And I feel like that's a really interesting parallel to what Moffat is trying to do. He's trying to give like a happy, successful goodbye to this character, to this version of the Doctor. But he's doing so in a way that undercuts the drama of last season. So with the Davies thing, the Rose character got her happy ending, but our version of the Doctor that we are continuing to follow after these events, didn't. So it doesn't feel like it erases the tragedy. It just changes or replaces it in a way. And I think that is like just fundamentally better writing, especially when we're talking about like long form serialized storytelling like this. So that's kind of just I guess that like kind of encapsulates the problems I have with this in a nutshell. It's like not any one thing in and of itself is bad. It's the confluation of them and the fact that you get kind of like a double or arguably triple whammy here. So let's go ahead and move on a little bit more into the episode, and let's talk about the characterization, the performance of the first Doctor by one David Bradley here. This is interesting because in the lead up to the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who, one of the things that BBC did was release a film called An Adventure in Time and Space, where they cast David Bradley to play William Hartnell. And this was a film about the early stages of production and a little bit about the first Doctor's time on Doctor Who. And it was really impressive biopic. It's incredibly sad by the end of it. And it was just really interesting. And so it's kind of fun to see David Bradley come back and just play the first Doctor throughout a whole thing here. I absolutely adore his performance. It's hilarious that he would have been like in his late 70s when this was filmed, and William Hartnell died at like 67, I think. So he is like actually pretty significantly older than the first Doctor ever was, as he plays this character. It's just interesting little side note there. But yeah, I quite like David Bradley's portrayal of the first Doctor here. How about you guys? What's the thoughts on the first Doctor?
Like, I don't really have anything to compare it to. Really.
You've watched? No, you do. You've seen the first Doctor in like so many of these.
I saw the original in like a TV screen.
Uh-huh.
That doesn't count.
Did you watch Five Doctors? You watched
like
Five Doctors
TV
with us.
screen off floating in the distance.
Yeah, but you watched Five Doctors with us.
Yeah, but wasn't he recast?
Yeah, he was recast for that. He's been recast like 4 times now.
Well, that's fair. No, I really liked him a lot. I gotta say, like, I'm surprised that this had this effect on me because I don't give a shit about classic Who or just Doctor Who as a franchise all that much. Like, not that I think it's bad. I just don't. I've never had an attachment to it. But when it opens on black and white footage and says 709 episodes ago, I don't know why. That put me in a fucking great mood. I was just like, that's such a fucking baller thing to start with. Like, that's so cool. No, I really liked him a lot. I don't know that I have a lot to add other than just I thought he was really fun and I really enjoyed him, and the digs at the casual sexism were very amusing to me. But I enjoyed his performance quite a bit. I thought he was really, really good, and the way he and Capaldi play off each other just felt effortlessly charming.
Yeah, the way that they interact so well together with the idea of like, yeah, could you imagine if you had to meet yourself when you're like 12 Be painful.
So, and I think that's probably why this is one of the best ideas of a doctor meeting a doctor, because it's not just like the Time Crash special. You've still got, like, by the time he's the fifth Doctor, he's pretty much figured it out. Still, the comedy there comes from the difference between classic Who and modern Who. But Tennant even goes like, "You were my Doctor." Like, the great thing about doing it with the first Doctor is he isn't the Doctor yet, but yet he is the most primal Doctor. Like, he is simultaneously the most different the show has ever been, but also the most pure the show has ever been. And, like, that contrast, I think, is really cool to when you throw him in the modern TARDIS and you throw him in a modern plot. And Moffat kind of talks about this, where it's kind of the ultimate fanboy, like, justification to yourself, where take the most old, outdated form of Doctor Who and you put it on HD and you put it against the modern stuff. And no, it works. That's the Doctor. Yeah, he fits. There's nothing wrong with this. And that's so fucking validating after, like, years of hearing, "Oh, Doctor Who's rubbish, it doesn't work, you need to change everything," and be like, no, if you do it right, the very first Doctor can come on screen and be entertaining. With sexism and all. Which I think is a really kind of Shadley move of, like, you could have changed him and changed his portrayal and made him more reverent, and kind of what they do in the previous ones where they're like, "Oh, he's the first Doctor, so he should be the smartest one," because of, like, the historical precedent for that. I really like Moffat being like, "No, he's the baby Doctor. He's not the weapon of Gallifrey. He's not the oncoming storm. He literally is just a fucking dude who was curious about a question and has no idea what life has in store for him." And that's just and how he plays it, David Bradley plays it, where he's just, if he was in his element, you can imagine he'd be more cruel or kind of snappy like the first Doctor is. But he's just so fucking confused the entire time. He just becomes a when he puts the sunglasses on him and he's like, "Don't you ever take those off." That's such a good fucking move. Like, yes, of course, if you got someone like William Hartnell, you want to put the fucking sonic sunglasses on him. How could you resist?
That's all great. And I do like that, like, he tries to like come in and be a little more snappy and like that, some of that rudeness of the first Doctor. It's so weird to me watching this because I started my Classic Who from the beginning watch. I can't say my watch all of Classic Who because no one can ever actually do that because they lost episodes, but whatever. I started my Classic Who rewatch and, like, I just got to the Aztecs when I watched this, and that is a fucking piece of media, certainly, that a lot of people say fond things about, and I don't think has been thought about as critically as it should. But regardless, it is interesting to see that in this you do still get some of those snappier, more like, the first Doctor was a bit of an ass, and it's funny that Bill calls the 12th Doctor an ass here, but, like, yeah, he's got these moments where he's trying to be all, like, witty and like above everyone else, which is very much what the first Doctor did, but he's, like, undercut by just, you know, modern times, the kind of more snappy, more irreverent nature of modern storytelling and characters. So just the, like, I love some of the lines and jabs. It's like, "Oh, you're future me? I thought I'd get younger. I am young." Like, it's just the like amount of butting heads and the bit with Bill. It's like, I have some experience of the finer sex. Yeah, so do I. That's all really, really good, really solid stuff, and I quite enjoyed that. Steve, what do you think of the first Doctor?
What?
Like I said earlier, I like him. He doesn't have as much bite, but I think, like you guys said, that it sort of makes sense to put him in a situation where he would naturally not have as much. I think he's really, really good. I love the contrast and trying to paint this picture of not only does 12 not want to regenerate and is kind of done with this, but 1 doesn't want to either. And I think throwing that wrinkle in and giving it a little bit more context. And then, like Matt said, with that old Who throwback, and like when he does regenerate, you use the original footage and just transition right back into what he was. That's a really cool full circle moment for him. I genuinely love how much these two characters really feel like the same person, and I'm really impressed with how Capaldi's able to kind of play off of this dude who is the actor is certainly younger than Capaldi is, but still kind of play the older, wiser mentor figure in contrast to that. Like, it can't be easy being like a late 70s dude and pretending like you're younger than the guy standing in front of you who is clearly younger. It's a really good performance.
Oh, you're talking about Bradley. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, my bad.
Yeah, it's a really good performance to like play an old man who is clearly also playing a child in relative to the person he's talking to. I really like that. I think it's really good and it's really subtle stuff. And I like how well he kind of bounces off of the modern Who plotting, the modern Who writing. I think one of the problems we have in general with Reboot Who, as much as I really like it, is there's a tendency to kind of get too involved with the what the fuck is going on in space-time shit. You know, like it gets to this point where it's like the stakes and what you're doing to address the stakes and the sheer insanity of everything that's happening feels like a bit too much. And it's not just a dude in a box kind of running around exploring the universe. And I think bringing in the First Doctor and playing him as a bit more naive and a bit more fun, but also having the same sort of existential dread as the 12th is a really solid move. And he does a fantastic job with it. I would not be disappointed if they decided to bring him back to just do more First Doctor stories, because I'd watch them.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think he's done a couple of things for Big Finish, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he's done some stuff for there, and like there are some other interviews and stuff with him where he talks about it, and he seems like just a genuinely awesome guy, and I wish we would just do more stuff with him.
So yeah, if you'd like to see more of him as the First Doctor, you definitely could. Alfie, you said you were about to say something before I threw over to Steve.
No, basically just kind of going where Steve was going to go. I think he does a really good job with the material. What I think is interesting is, speaking of Moffat repeating old tricks, this is, again, another opportunity where he defines what the Doctor's motivation for leaving Gallifrey was. And you know what? I hope every time, if he ever comes back to Doctor Who, I hope he adds another one just to piss people off. I hope he just keeps adding new reasons. But this one's probably my favorite. Because I like the idea that he ran away because he was scared or because of the hybrid, all this thing. I just like this one. He just had a question. Like, he just wanted to know, like, why does good triumph over evil? Like, he's like, he realized he was in a fictional universe and didn't quite grasp that. And so he went out on that journey, and then I love that it's still subconscious. Like, that's something Moffat always portrays with the Doctor. Like, in the Robin Hood episode, he's like this. Like, Moffat's I think Davies' Doctor knew he was hot shit and knew he was a hero and, like, kind of wanted to be a good person. I think the difference is Moffat's Doctor has an unbelievably low opinion of himself compared to Davies. And I really like that for a hero like him, where he has no concept that he is this great protector. Like, he will hype himself up and be like, yeah, I'm a destroyer. I am this. Like, he'll use that as an advantage, but he'll say he's a protector, but he doesn't quite believe it. He never really buys what he's own selling when he's saying it, but everyone else around him knows it. Clara points this out. Bill points this out. And I love that when he's so young and he's searching for himself, and so he can never find it. Like, Doctor Who becomes the answer to the Doctor's question. But they never have the Doctor himself. Like, a lesser thing would have then had the Doctor, like, go to himself and be like, oh yeah, I was searching for this question and stuff like that. They have just that little moment on the battlefield after you get the really great armistice for Christmas. I'm surprised it took Doctor Who this long to do that moment, but it's a perfect send-off. for Capaldi's doctor to have him be there and use that to his advantage. It's so well done. In the behind the scenes, David Bradley talks about that him and Capaldi had to like fight back tears when all the extras got up because they were like, "Oh my god, this is it. It feels like we were really there." And like the doctor itself, they both got that into the character. I think that's kind of amazing that they both shared that moment. Like it wasn't just one of them got weepy. I was like, they're both like, "Oh man, this is it. This is the end." So that's really impressive. And that whole scene when he's just like, so that's what it's mean like to be a doctor of war, and kind of recontextualizing everything about Modern Who up to this point. It just makes it really feel like this has been one long 700+ episode character arc of a scientist who traveled the universe for many years, was beaten back by horror, eventually became a hero, but then that horror adapted to him and created a war that engulfed not only them, but his own people, and he was forced to betray the very principles of what he cared, and then coming back from that, but still being eternally scarred from that, and going through everything until he just wants to die because he's now fucking the oldest Time Lord that's ever lived, and he just can't. He doesn't want to do it anymore. He's just tired, and I think that's fair. And then getting him to meet the First Doctor and being like, "No, this is worth it. This whole thing has been worth it." Like, I mean, like, what other show can you do that with, man? That's some fucking payoff.
Yeah, because like the only comparison you could think of is like if modern Superman meant Action Comics #1 Superman or something like that,
Yeah,
right? And even then, they're
yeah.
not really the same character anymore because DC has made it so apparent that they are not. That this is not the evolution of the one character. That Golden Age Superman is off on his own Earth still, or what the fuck ever. It doesn't have quite the same weight to it, but the choice to who was rebooted to continue it as just nope, all the doctors before stand. This is just the next in the line is a really brave choice, and it works quite well for the way the series plays. I do really love the like bookend feeling that this has. It is kind of funny because Capaldi is the 12th Doctor, which should be the last one, but technically is the first in the new line of Doctors. And so you get like this really interesting conclusion to the old line fully passing on and becoming the new. I just wish that the new line had a much stronger start than we got. But it is interesting. Also, I think it's cool to have the multi-Doctor episode that is also a regeneration episode. That's fundamentally interesting to be able to get to see a new Doctor appear in the same episode that you just had 2 Doctors in. I think that's really cool. It is a remarkably unique set of circumstances to get to do that. Obviously, if Moffat had had his brothers, it wouldn't have been that way. He would have just regenerated. Capaldi would have just regenerated into Jodie at the end of Series 10. But because of the Christmas special thing, no, this is he had to think on his feet, and Moffat turned in something quite damn brilliant. I wouldn't say it's the best thing he's written, even in necessarily Series 10. But it is just damn good, and it all comes together really well, and it leads into a really interesting thing. I will say, as much as I like the Jodie regeneration and stuff, I like the sense of the writers putting the Doctor into a situation that seems like untenable and then just passing the hot potato off to the next showrunner. I think that's really fun and like interesting and creative from a writing perspective. I do feel a little disappointed that it's just not exactly the same, but like so fundamentally close to the same situation that Tennant to Smith was, that I am just like a tiny bit disappointed that it's so closely identical. I wish it had gone like a little harder and been, a little bit different and crazier. Like the Commandi challenge kind of vibe.
Yeah, it's the thing about that as well, which I think is to kind of talk about the Jodie thing, is that whole like the moment Capaldi says, "Doctor, I let you go," then that's Chibnall who writes the rest of that scene, and like that's always kind of been the tradition. Is the last 2 minutes of the episode where the showrunner ends of is produced and directed and written by the next team. So like the Dave episode era, like those script remasters were written by Moffat, and like Moffat's talked about like what other show can you get to have the next production team do the last bit of the last production? That's just so ridiculous that it's kind of beautiful that you could get that mad with it. But I do think maybe that was like a foretelling of things to come. The fact that it was kind of a repeat.
Fair enough.
Like, maybe we should have been worried.
Minusing the sort of very apt concerns that would come with Jodie's series, I do think this is probably the best regeneration in all of Reboot Who. And I say that as like a Matt Smith stan. Like I fucking love Matt Smith. I love every scene that dude is on in Doctor Who, even if the episodes aren't great. And so, like, I cry watching Time with the Doctor when he says goodbye, but I do genuinely think 12 has the best regeneration. There's so much, like, loaded into that moment. Like, you stretch the final moment out where he refuses to regenerate and turn it into an entire fucking episode. And in places, it certainly does feel padded, where it feels like there's a lot of fluff outside of the existential stuff. But that's also the kind of thing that I appreciate about stories, where, like, you take the logical thing and you just suspend it for a minute so you can do some deep personal questions, because fuck the logical thing. Yeah, of course he can hold his regeneration in for like a fucking hour. That's fine. That's normal. He can totally do that. Why not? But having him like go through that journey and then finally regenerating and giving that speech, and the way that speech operates, where he's talking to the audience, he's talking about himself as an actor, he's talking about the history of the show, and he's passing it off to another person. I think all of those beats just hit so fluidly, and I think he delivers a performance there where it feels like a genuine goodbye. It doesn't. The Matt Smith one is really, really good, but that one sort of feels more like a doctor has learned his lesson and is now going away, whereas this one feels more like a kind of like an anniversary. It feels like this is the culmination of 12 different doctors up to this point, or I guess 14 or something, however the numbering works out eventually. Is the culmination of an entire lineage, and he's not just learning his lesson here, he's saying that this era of who the Doctor has been up to this point is over, and I'm letting it go. And it's just so beautiful, and he delivers it so well. He fucking sounds like an old 40s actor in some of those speeches, and in the way he delivers those lines. It's like he's talking at the camera, like he's standing in front of an auditorium of people, like it's fucking 1940s Hollywood. I adore it.
Matt, I'm curious because of, again, the less of with Doctor Who and stuff. What did you think of like the whole regeneration scene, and like what did it land for you still, or stuff like how would that read without having as much like attachment?
Yeah, I mean, so like for me, like watching this episode in isolation and not really getting into not really understanding or really knowing the full breadth of the wider context with what's going on with Capaldi's Doctor overall, it still really hits for me, because this episode, I remember one of the things that I first heard that criticism of was the thing that video took umbrage with was the whole there is no evil plot bit. And to me, I loved that, because this whole episode felt like it was about the Doctor dealing with fear, and like more broadly, this whole story was just about fear and overcoming that. And there is no evil plot, because the evil plot is created by the Doctor's fear that there's going to be an evil plot. And so it's about him getting over that. It's about him and the First Doctor getting over their fears and their reservations about where they're going. And so For me, that ending monologue still definitely hit because contextualized within just the story of this episode, it felt like a man finally letting go of these fears and reservations and finally letting himself move forward. And I really liked that, and I thought it hit. Having seen several of the regeneration scenes in a vacuum, I do think just aesthetically, I like the one from Smith to Capaldi the best. But this was really good, and it does definitely hit for me, and I think it works. I think I miss out on the broader context of it and the way it feels like a culmination of something bigger, like you guys were saying. But I think watching this stand alone, it still hits pretty well. Obviously, the stuff with like the companions coming back means fuck all to me, but like this bald dude shows up out of nowhere, and I'm just like, okay.
My fan theory is that Matt Smith really got depressed about leaving Doctor Who and let himself go, and then came back. That's my fan theory about Noddle, because they look very. It looks like Matt Smith in a fat suit. I'm just gonna be brave and say it.
But yeah, I mean, the whole speech and the whole story to me just felt like he's overcoming these fears and reservations he has, and I think that ties in with the Christmas armistice stuff too. Because what's that whole opening monologue reads like a fucking thesis state, or not opening monologue, but that whole opening scene with Margatis reads like a fucking thesis statement on the episode about this fear that is causing this mutually assured destruction, and what allows the armistice to happen is people overcoming that fear. And I just think it works really, really well. Like it's so good. Like it hits really, really well for me.
The thing that puts it over the top for me is when he says, "Don't say your name, except to children, because children can hear it if their hearts are in the right place." And like,
That's so. Go ahead, Steve.
I was just gonna say there's something so like beautiful about this episode. Where Matt, I think you nail it 100%, which is the there is no evil plot works so well because the point of this episode ultimately is that you're always searching for a problem to solve. You're always searching for the thing around the corner. You're always doing the Moffat thing of the perception filter, where if you just look at the corner of your eye, there is something dark and scary and terrifying underneath you. And this doctor has so many stories about the kinds of obsessions that have terrified him since he was a kid, like in Listen, or that episode on the submarine where he gets turned into a ghost. Like he's always courting death in that weird sort of way. And then in this final episode, he's realizing that all of the evil he sees in the universe, it's not that it's not there, but it's that actively searching it out can corrupt him to a certain point where he feels like he needs to ask himself the question whether or not he's a good person. And he can't just be happy with that notion that he's trying to be, and that's all that should matter. And so you get to that final moment where there's the armistice and everyone's just kind of finally at a moment of peace, and he gives himself that final speech. And in that final speech, he's leaving a lesson to his next regeneration. And the lesson kind of hits all the bullet points of all of Doctor Who up to this point, where the focus is the Doctor is about kindness. The Doctor is about exploration. And in that moment, the thing that the Doctor really hits on is he gives children something to hope for. He gives them a part of their imagination that will be with them for the rest of their lives. You look at something like the Matt Smith episode where like a kid is just praying, please save me from the monsters, and the Doctor shows up to save him. And here you've got similar situations where there's that great fucking moment with Clara where Clara betrays him, and he's like, do you really think I care about you so little that betraying me would matter? The Doctor is a profoundly honest, good person because he tries to be. And in that final moment, his message is not only to his future self to maintain that, but to acknowledge that the children who are watching him can find a sense of peace and hope in the future and a sense of imagination that is greater than anything else in their lives. And it's just so fucking beautiful. I love it.
You know what really fucking makes it like that extra tier, and like why I'll always, to my dying breath, say Peter Capaldi's the best Doctor? Because that whole fucking bit of like children hear your name, Moffat was like, yeah, So we were on a fucking press tour, and Peter just said that. And I looked at him, I'm like, why aren't you writing the fucking show? Like, he was like, that's going in the episode. He's like, oh, don't put it in the episode, Stephen. You're the writer. And he's like, no, you just made the most beautiful fucking offhanded comment about the purity of Doctor Who. You fuck, I hate you. Why are you so good?
When's
And I'm just
Peter
like,
Capaldi gonna become Doctor Who showrunner? God damn it!
I mean, he'd fucking every time he talks about it, like it's like when Andrew Garfield talks about Spider-Man or when Christopher Reeve talks about Superman. It's just like they get it more than the fucking people making the show. It's just we're just lucky with Capaldi, and other doctors have this as well, of course. But Capaldi's really the one where like he was old enough to watch William Hartnell. He is, again, knock on wood kind of thing, but he's getting up there. But eventually, like he's one of the people still alive who has watched almost the entire. You know what you're saying about Ian? Like, oh, with no person alive can. He's watched like he's watched the missing episode.
Damn it!
Like he had a moment with Mark Gatiss where he was like, oh yes, you remember the episode with the Daleks invading? Oh, that's a great one. And Mark Gatiss was like, no, Peter, that's missing. I was one when that came out. And he's like, oh no, that's a shame.
That's so fucked.
It's so fucked, but like it's one of those things where this dude just really, if you're gonna give that speech to anyone, the fact that he did it, and well, a part of this vibe about this episode that really does kind of give me like a warm, fuzzy, creative feeling is it kind of feels like when we do projects, like when we do Geeky Gentleman or like DBDC or stuff, is it this episode is just Stephen Moffat getting his mates to make a Doctor Who episode with like the first, like Mark Gatiss is his fucking best friend. He's like, yeah, come on, I wrote this for you. I want you here when I do this. When Peter Capaldi's like, oh yeah, we've got the third Doctor's coat. Mark's got get it, put it in the set. But it's like, it's just so fucking wholesome. They're just fanboys, and they have their moments throughout the series. But this one specifically really felt like, yeah, and let's trick the BBC to let us use the fucking first Doctor set again because it's hype. And let's fucking put William Hartnell with the funny glasses on him, and let's bring the Dalek back, and let's have you could be the Brigadier's grandfather, yo! Like I can just see that. Like it's such a fucking fanboy, fan-ficky script, but it's just executed on such a high level that it doesn't matter. It's just great, and the fact that Matt is like cursory thing to Doctor Who, the fact that it can still hit you on that level, I think, is just a testament to it being great writing beyond like that. This is how you do fan service. You make it a sprinkle. It is not necessary to understand everything, but if you do understand it, it will enhance everything, and that's the fucking way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a absolutely fantastic episode. It's up there with one of Moffat's best, I think.
Easily,
yeah. Even with the problems I have with Moffat's writing, it is always because I know he can do so well, and like there's shit in here that just frustrates me because it's kind of, this is, I think, the most representative of Moffat Who in that regard, because it's got some of his highest highs, but it's also like kind of guilty of some of his lowest lows, or not even his lowest, just as like it's guilty of his bag of tricks, you know. Oh, we're gonna go to this like brand new center of knowledge that never has been talked about before in the show, and the person there wants to kill me. Okay, what's it gonna be? Oh, there's a monster here, but it's inherently obvious what it is, but we're gonna build it up like it's a big mystery. Oh, and here's this character returning that probably didn't need to, but here he is anyway. It's just got a lot of that going on. It also kind of is guilty of like backing the Doctor into a corner of like, okay, there's really no logical way out of this one, but kind of just letting the trappings of the episode get him. It's funny. Seeing Rusty come back was like, I think, the epitome of a, oh, that guy kind of moment. Yeah. Like it really did feel like the fucking, what was the name of the blue guy that showed up in a couple Moffat episodes that like wasn't a thing?
I forgot.
Yeah, exactly.
The
Right?
blue fat dude who showed up in the Matt Smith
Yeah, it's like, it's exactly like that feeling to me, to see Rusty of all characters come back. The
Matt's or not Matt Smith. Moffat has this weird, uncanny ability to like give you emotional connections to the stupidest fucking things ever.
Mhm.
Like, what is more comic booky than that? Like, I remember like legitimately being in tears when fucking Handles dies in the Doctor. Like, what the fuck? Like, Matt Smith is just like, come on, one more sunset. Like, why am I crying? It's a fucking Cyberman head. I haven't seen this ever. It's the first time I met you 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, and I think this is just a really good encapsulation of just everything that makes Moffat Who what it is, good and bad, and so it's a really interesting little capsule in that regard. Because you see some of his highest like marks as a writer for the show, and then you also see some of the more unfortunate sides of his writing independencies. And so it's just an interesting little trip there.
Okay, sorry, one last thing, and then I'm basically tapped. But I just wanted to say, I think Moffat, in the way you described him, with his highest highs and his lowest lows, is kind of the quintessential Doctor Who writer, because he epitomizes Doctor Who in general. Because Doctor Who is probably the greatest idea for a media franchise ever. And it spends its entire legacy designed from its very core to resist the things about culture that eventually get bad and annoying. Like, it resists nostalgia, it resists stagnation, it's all about death and rebirth, it's all about changing and growing, it's all about exploration and becoming new things and having an eye on your past and never living in it. It is by design the best idea for an ongoing franchise ever, because it can be that mass market appeal and still constantly create artistic, interesting, intimate, emotional things, because it's always trying to evolve and there is no other requirements for it. And when you do that, you get some of the most beautiful pieces of fiction ever, like fucking Vincent van Gogh learning about his legacy, or the 12th Doctor effectively deciding not to kill himself and become a new person again because he needs to keep moving. But you also get some of the stupidest shit to ever be graced on a TV screen. And honestly, Doctor Who, it can be terrible. It can be absolute rubbish. And it can be like fucking Mona Lisa art. But it never stops being Doctor Who. And you hear something and you can just feel it. Oh, that's a Doctor Who episode. And it's the same with Moffat, where like he can write some of the most emotionally engaging things I've ever read, and then come up with the stupidest thing I've ever heard said out loud by another human being. But you will always know it was said by Moffat.
Oh, no, it's true. It's true. He really puts like a stamp on it. It's crazy. I think I'm also all tapped on this one. I really like this episode though. This is a good one. I don't want my complaints to undermine my enjoyment of it. It is just the Moffatest Moffat episode to ever Moffat of Doctor Who. I think is a fair assessment. Any other one else got any final thoughts before we go on to ratings?
I'm pretty tapped out as well. I think all of Ian's Moffat critiques in this instance are valid. I don't have an issue with any of them. I think you're probably right. It would have been stronger if they'd cut back on like the Clara thing, or cut back on the Nardole thing, or one thing at a time, etc. I think that's also just a case of you had your big Artur ending, and then they give you time for fun. So I think he literally just said, "You know what? Fuck off." Like, I think you just, I want to have all my friends on this one. Like, I think it just literally came down to that. And from a writing standpoint, yeah, that was a mistake. But also, I can't deny that if I was like, oh yeah, here's the ending of DBDC, and it's like, oh, YouTube wants you to make one more. If I wouldn't just be like, all right, every voice actor that's ever been on the project's coming back, like, just for the fucking like meme of it. Like, so I can understand the reason, but like from as a piece of media and what it's given to you, I think all the critiques are valid. I don't think this is just as a piece, the strongest episode Moffat's ever put together. But I mean, that's not necessarily a condemnation of this, because you look at something like fucking Heaven Sent, and it's like, Jesus Christ, like that's so like this not being as good as that isn't a condemnation of this. That's just saying like there's still a really high bar to clear with this stuff, and that's always great to say for a writer. So I think Moffat, and even just talking with you guys and being able to express my thought on this more in a way that's not just me having to defend Moffat for 24/7 against other people online, such as a H-Bomber guy, like it made me like this episode even more because I didn't have to just be on the defensive the whole time. So that's great. That's a good feeling. So yeah, this one's a real special one, folks.
You might say it's a Christmas special.
Hey, I hope it's not the. You know what though? Because they stopped doing them. If this is the last Doctor Who Christmas special forever, fuck, man, you couldn't go out a better one, I don't think.
Okay, but we all admit, right? The idea that they don't do Christmas specials anymore is fucking bullshit.
I mean,
It's fucking bullshit.
Okay, in all fairness,
They don't have to be good. Just put out a Christmas
okay, but
special.
in all fairness, it's not that they stopped doing specials. They just stopped doing them on Christmas. Jodie has 2 New Year's specials, for what that's worth.
Those fucking suck.
No, they're fine. I like them.
No, they're not terrible, but like they should be Christmas specials.
Okay.
I agree with Steve. There's fundamentally something very just
Okay,
like...
that's because you fucking grew up with it.
Exactly, man. This is my This is the only culture I have.
That's about it. Like I don't know. There's something in my brain where like I didn't grow up on Doctor Who per se. I found it when I was a teenager. But when I was a teenager, they started doing more Christmas specials with Tennant. And I can't get my parents to watch jack shit with me when it comes to geeky things, but every fucking Tennant Christmas special we watch together as a family. So, like, not having them anymore is bullshit.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, like, Ian, you know me. I hate England more than fucking Guy Fawkes. But, like, this is the one thing that they had that was like good going for them, man. Like the Christmas special for Doctor Who on BBC One just hit different.
What do you hate more? Do you hate England more or Pride Special John Kent?
England, man. England.
Matt?
No hesitation, no fucking doubt. You know when David Tennant looks at the Daleks and he's like, they win. They always win while I lose everything. That's me.
Matt, do you have any closing thoughts on this episode?
No. To quote one of my favorite Joss Whedon movies, more than anything, I just want this conversation to be over.
Okay, damn. Harsh. All right, let's go ahead and go on to ratings. I'll go first. 4 out of 5. The first Doctor wearing sunglasses.
I'll give it 4 out of 5 space lesbians. I thought this was pretty good.
Space lesbian. That poor fifth space lesbian left out in the cold.
I'll give it 4 out of 5 ambiguous grandfather reveals.
I'm going to give this 4 out of 5 Peter Capaldi speaking to the first Doctor's face and telling him he's the best Doctor. It's canon now. You can't argue with me. Out of 5. A bit false starts, but you get there. That is fucking shitty, Grid. I love this bastard.
Fair.
Love it.
Alrighty. That'll do it for this episode. We need I promised Steve that he could do, if he wants, 6 weeks of our tour films.
Please, God, have mercy. No.
Okay.
I can't, Steve.
Can I propose a compromise?
Okay.
All right. I want to do a theme month for 4 movies that are all effectively the same genre, but are like different spectrums of blockbuster to artsy. And I picked these 4 movies ahead of time because I think they would also specifically appeal to Matt. And they're all kind of the same sort of vibe. It just goes from cheeky blockbuster nonsense all the way to like, what fucking 18th century poem is this quote?
Okay.
I love it.
Okay. So my idea here is, let's do sword and sorcery movies that have gone through the ages and gone from schlockiness to greatness. And so I was thinking we could do the Northman, we can do the Green Knight, we can do Conan the Barbarian, and then we can pick the last one based on how we feel about those 3.
Okay. So what's the first one we'll do then?
So chronologically, it would be the Arnold Schwarzenegger Conan the Barbarian.
Yes!
I feel like that's a pretty decent compromise.
Yeah!
Matt would literally suck your dick right now, Steve.
Matt legit went
You
from...
asked for mercy, and I gave you a gift.
Matt legit went from, please, Steve, please don't hurt me, to, Steve, I love you so much. You're my favorite geeky gentleman.
You were my geeky gentleman, Steve.
Steve, I'm gonna talk about so much Conan lore. I'm
actually legitimately pretty hyped because I just rewatched it recently. I'm like, I have so much to say about this movie. Weird.
Interesting. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So next...
I've been wanting to watch this movie lately anyways. Yay!
Alright, so next week we'll be talking about Conan the Barbarian, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. Until next time, everyone, I'm the Philosopher.
I'm the Doctor Who erotica lover.
I am the name that if you listen closely, you could hear.
And I was just here.
And we are here at Geeky Gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.
So, like, okay, no, I'm legitimately...